When you think about the history of war, the picture that usually comes to mind is mostly men, right?
Yeah,
Soldiers on battlefields.
right. That's the dominant image we've inherited.
But, there's this whole other layer, this hidden history of women in combat. So many courageous acts have just been overlooked for centuries.
Exactly. And that's what we're getting into today. We've got some really fascinating source material here that digs into these unsung stories. Women who stepped right into military conflicts, often completely defying the norms of their time.
Yeah, our sources cover a lot the societal biases that kind of erased women's roles, some amazing individual stories, and even how their actions, maybe subtly, shaped modern military thinking.
Hmm.
So our mission for this deep dive, it's really to pull out the key insights about their bravery and understand why their contributions were so often pushed aside or just plain ignored, trying to get a fuller picture.
Absolutely. It's not just recounting famous battles. It's about understanding who was actually there and the incredible hurdles they faced, hurdles beyond just the enemy fire. It's about piecing together a much richer history.
Okay, so let's start with that bigger picture. The material really drives home how deep these societal biases ran. This idea that women were primarily, caregivers.
Homemakers, caregivers, yeah. The idea of them in combat was just unthinkable for many societies for a very long time.
And this wasn't just an abstract idea, was it? It directly affected what got written down.
Oh, absolutely. Because the prevailing view was that women shouldn't be there. Their presence often just wasn't recorded. Or if their actions were too significant to ignore, maybe they'd be credited to men or just sort of glossed over in official
So
accounts.
it creates this cycle, right? They're not in the records, which then proves they weren't suited for combat.
Precisely. A lack of documentation reinforces the bias. And as you said, this had real teeth. It directly shaped military policies. For ages, women were formally barred from combat roles in so many countries.
Yeah, these weren't just dusty old attitudes. They were actual rules with huge consequences. Think about the lost opportunities. The capable women denied the chance to serve in certain ways.
Exactly. And it perpetuated the stereotypes,
Yeah.
made it harder to challenge the idea that women weren't capable. It was a massive barrier.
It's pretty sobering, the long shadow of those exclusions. But the sources do point to a major turning point, don't they? Like the U.S. military finally lifting its ban on women in combat in 2015.
Yes, that was huge. Really significant. If you look at it historically, it's kind of a formal, long overdue nod to what women had often been doing unofficially for centuries anyway.
Right, often in the shadows.
Yeah. It showed a growing recognition, maybe still evolving, but a recognition of their capabilities. And the material notes, this isn't just the U.S. Other countries have made similar moves. It's more of a global shift.
Okay, so with that backdrop of bias and gradual change, let's look at some individuals. Joan of Arc. Everyone knows the name, but the details, they can be a bit hazy.
Well, what's amazing is when she emerged the early 15th century, during the Hundred Years' War, a really chaotic time for France. And here comes this young peasant girl.
Claiming divine visions told her to lead the French army.
Exactly. And she was, what, 17?
17, it's just
Hmm.
hard to fathom. And she didn't just talk about it, she persuaded battle-hardened commanders to actually let her lead troops. A teenager, no noble background, taking charge.
It says a lot about her conviction, maybe also about how desperate the French situation was. But look, she wasn't just a figurehead. She put on armor, carried a banner, led soldiers into the fight.
And her role at Orléans in 1429, lifting that siege, the material stresses how crucial that was.
Oh, absolutely pivotal.
Yeah.
Turned the tide, massively boosted French morale, and directly led to Charles II getting crowned. That was huge for France. So the core insight, even in that incredibly patriarchal era, her leadership fundamentally changed the course of a major war.
Orléans was the turning point, and she was right there. But the sources also make it clear her being a woman made her a target, not just for the enemy.
Precisely. A woman with that kind of influence in that society, it was deeply threatening to the established order.
Wow.
That skepticism, the betrayal, it led to her capture in 1430.
And then executed for heresy just a year later, only 19. Such a tragic end.
Truly tragic.
Yeah.
But, as you mentioned, her story didn't end there. Canonized a saint centuries later in 1920,
All right.
which shows her enduring power as a symbol, courage, faith, defying the odds. But as the material points out, for a long time, the focus was more on her martyrdom, maybe overshadowing her actual military achievements.
Yeah, it's like the sainthood narrative was maybe easier to accept than acknowledging her as a highly effective military strategist and leader in her own right.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It really highlights how a woman could drastically alter history on the battlefield even then, but her legacy got kind of reframed.
Okay, fascinating. Let's jump forward a few centuries. World War II. Nancy Wake the White Mouse. What a nickname.
It really tells you something, doesn't it? Her incredible knack for evading the Gestapo. She was originally a journalist, born in New Zealand, but living in France when the Nazis occupied it.
And she just felt she had to do something.
It seems so. By 1940, she was involved with the French resistance. Witnessing the occupation pushed her into action.
And the things she did. Coordinating supply drops, leading guerrilla attacks, smuggling Allied soldiers out. The material mentions her cycling hundreds of miles for messages.
Just astounding resourcefulness and bravery. But she did even more. In 44, right before D-Day, she actually parachuted back into France.
Parachuted in. Wow.
Yeah, to organize and arm the local resistance fighters. She ended up commanding thousands of them. So you see, even in the 20th century, these challenges for women in combat roles persisted. But look at her resilience, her strategic mind.
Leading thousands. That's incredible. And that story in the material about her killing an SS guard with her bare hands, it's chilling.
It really rams home the danger she was in and her absolute commitment. No wonder the Gestapo had her on their most wanted list. She was seriously disrupting their operations.
Her evasion skills must have been legendary. Quick thinking, planning, her network.
Had to be. And yet, like Joan of Arc, despite all she did, all the honors she got after the war, her story kind of faded from the mainstream for a while. We're seeing that pattern again, aren't we?
It definitely feels like a recurring theme. A woman makes a huge impact, receives accolades, but then somehow slips out of the main historical narrative.
Yeah, it suggests this maybe ongoing societal habit of downplaying women's roles in areas seen as male, even when the evidence of their impact is undeniable. But Nancy Wake's story, it just screams capability. Strategic brilliance, excelling under extreme pressure, it directly challenges those old gender norms and really helps pave the way for the integration we see today.
Okay, moving from the ground and espionage to the air. The Night Witches. The Soviet airwomen in WWII. Another really fascinating, maybe less widely known story.
Oh, definitely. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment, an all-female unit formed by the Soviets in 1942. Think about that, an entire combat regiment, just women.
In 1942. And flying these, the material calls them rickety old biplanes, Polikarpov Po-2s.
Exactly. Outdated planes, flying night bombing missions against German targets. The conditions were incredibly tough, limited gear, bad weather, and yes, sexism even from their own side sometimes.
Yet they flew. What was the number?
Over 23,000 missions.
23,000. That's just mind-boggling. And their tactics, flying low and slow at night to avoid detection, they turned the plane's weaknesses into strengths.
That's right. These slow, quiet planes were surprisingly effective for sneaking up at night. The Germans apparently dreaded them, hence the nickname Nachtsechsen, night witches.
It gives you chills. And the material mentions pilots like Nadezhda Popova.
Yes. Flew 852 missions. Can you imagine? 852 combat missions. She was named the hero of the Soviet Union, quite rightly.
Unbelievable bravery. And yet, again, that pattern. The material says their role, despite being critical to the war effort, often got minimized afterwards.
It fits the theme, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Joan of Arc, Nancy Wake, the Night Witches. Even when women profoundly shape the outcome of war, their stories can get sidelined in the history books later on.
Yeah.
But the Night Witches are such a powerful example of skill, determination, changing the game even when facing bias and terrible conditions.
So, looking at all these stories together, Joan, in the 1400s, Wake and the Night Witches in the 1900s, what's the common thread? What's the big takeaway?
Well, the inescapable insight really is that women have always been capable fighters.
Yeah.
Always. Regardless of the cultural norms trying to keep them out.
Yeah.
Our sources show how that historical erasure held back progress, but the sheer grit and courage of these women, and so many others we don't even know about, they forced the door open bit by bit.
And that connects directly to today, doesn't it? That 2015 U.S. policy shift being a key milestone.
Absolutely. It's a direct result of this long, often unacknowledged history of women proving their mettle. Recognizing them isn't just about, correcting the history books. It's fundamental to equality.
It really is.
Their bravery, facing enemy fire and societal prejudice, just shows the incredible strength women bring to any field.
It makes you realize how important it is to tell these stories, keep them alive. It honors their sacrifices, and it also, crucially, empowers women today and tomorrow, thinking about them. It really makes you wonder how many other stories are still out there untold.
And how understanding that history fully could change how we think about leadership, potential, everything. It challenges our stereotypes of what a warrior even looks like.
So for you listening right now, what really stands out to you from these incredible stories?
Yeah, think about that and consider how much our understanding of conflict, maybe even leadership itself, might have been shaped, maybe limited, by sidelining contributions like these for so long.
And maybe a final thought to chew on. What if we fully, enthusiastically acknowledge all the diverse ways people contribute, especially in tough times, not just in war, but everywhere? How could that richer, truer understanding of history unlock even more potential for our future?